Hey everyone, welcome to section 3. In this section, we will create the initial CRUD operations for nodes using MobX. So in this section, we will first create the nodes store and then we will list the nodes. After that, we will add and edit the nodes using forms and then we will delete or archive nodes. So let's get started with creating the nodes store first. In order to work with the nodes store, we first need to create a model for node. So far we are just working with the type any for the nodes that we are creating, but we are going to create an interface as well as a class for node. So whenever we need to create a new node, we will be creating an instance of the node class. After that, we will create the service which will act as the store for the nodes. So let's jump into the code now. So I'm going to go into the code and I'm going to create a folder named core. Inside, I'm going to have a folder named models. And inside, I'm going to create a file naming node.model.ts. In here, I'm going to export an interface and I'm going to call this inode. And I'm going to have the ID as number, title as string, description as string, and archive as boolean. Now notice that I have a capital I before the node, and this is one of the conventions that developers follow throughout the world when they're naming the interfaces. Now I'm going to export the class as well, which will be called node, and I'm going to implement the inode interface. So I have to use all of these properties when I'm implementing the inode interface. So I'm going to use that, and then in the constructor, I'm going to make sure that whenever an instance of the node is created, we do pass a partial of the node. So it will have a node of the type partial and it will be of partial inode. Now what will happen is that whenever we are going to create an instance, we will pass some values. For instance, we will say this is the title, this is the description of the node, and it will automatically assign the ID, for instance, or archived, for instance. So we can potentially provide a couple of properties, can leave the others. So whenever a node is created, it will have some values by default. So here I'm going to say this.id equals, if we have got an ID of the node which was passed, then we will use the ID that was provided. Otherwise, we'll just do new date.getTime, and this will make sure that something a bit different. So for archived, I'm going to check if the node has archived not equals to undefined. So we may be passing false or true, but if it is not undefined, which means that it could be false or true, then we use what was passed. So we will just use the value. Otherwise, we'll use false as the default value. So we can create a node with archived set to false or set to true, but if it is undefined, we will be using false as the default value. Now that we have created the interface and the class, we can now use this when creating the nodes. So I'm going to go to homepage, and here what I'm going to do is when we are pushing the node, we can simply assign the class here and the interfaces. So here I'm going to say this is going to be of type node, and we have to import the node from the core models. Now that we have assigned this, we can simply go below, and then here we are going to push the node. So what I'm going to do here is, instead of assigning all of this, I'm going to do new node, and here we can pass partial of the inode class. So I can simply pass this object now and there will be no errors. So now we are pushing a new node instance whenever we are creating a node, and that's cool. So here as well in the archive node, I'm going to use the node class, and yeah, I think that's pretty much about it. So let's save this and see if this works fine and see this working on the browser. Now you can see that everything is working fine, so I can create nodes and I can also archive nodes. So the next step is to create the node service. Let's do that. So to create a service, we will do Ionic G service, and then I can say the node service, so I can just say nodes. But if I just run this with the try run flag, you will notice one thing. So let's run this, and you will see that behind the scenes it's running ng generate service command, and the dry run will make sure that this is not actually executed to the IO. So you can see that if we created this service, this would end up in the source app folder. But we don't want that. What we want is that we will create the service inside a folder. So we will create core and inside services, and inside that we will have the nodes folder. So I'm going to remove dry run so we actually get the created service. So I'm going to run this now. And let's see where it puts the service now. So we will have a core folder, services, and then we have this node service. So let's go into the code and start working on it. So now if I just go here, you can see now we have the services folder and we have the node service inside. So we have to use this service as a store. And for that, what we can do is we can move some things to here in the node service from the actual page. So I'm going to go to homepage TS and I'm going to move this observable nodes from here to the service. So I'm going to move this here. I'm going to import from MobX Angular, and I'll also import the node class. And now we can move other things as well. So I'm going to go to homepage TS, and here we had this init nodes, which basically sets the nodes to an empty array. So I'm going to remove all of the actions and the computed values from here. So I'm going to just copy these and go back here, and then I'm just going to add these. So I'm also going to import the action. So now we have the service setup. What we can do is we can quickly use and modify some of the things here, so this is reusable. So the archive node is fine. The init nodes is also fine. We do need to call this init nodes when the constructor is called when the node service is initiated. So I'm going to say this dot init nodes. So this is initiated when the application starts, and then the nodes is set to an empty array. But here we are hard coding a node and we are pushing it right from here. So what I'm going to do instead is that I'm going to accept a partial node. So I'm going to say node. This is going to be a partial inode. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pass that node here. So this is now dynamic and we can use this create node method from any of the components. So I'm going to go to homepage TS. I'm going to use the store methods here instead, but I'm going to remove this computed from here. I'm also going to remove this init nodes from here. And I'm also going to just make this not an action. And what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to import the node service. So I'm going to say private node service, and I'm going to say nodes service. So in archive node, I'm going to go here and I'm going to say this dot node service dot archive node, and here I'm going to pass the node. And that's it. We are not modifying the archive right here, but we are doing it in the node service instead. Similarly, I'm going to remove this as an action, and when creating a node, I'm just going to go here and say this dot node service dot create node, and I'm going to be passing the node that we are adding. So I'm going to just keep this and I'm going to remove this, just put a semicolon, and let's see now what we have. So we have an observable of nodes. We are not going to use that. And I'm going to go to the HTML to use the node service instead. And we can in fact rename this to a store. So I'm going to rename it and I'm going to say store. And I'm just going to copy this and go to the HTML. And here, instead of saying let node of nodes, I'm going to say let node of store dot nodes. And I'm also going to say store dot archive nodes counts. And let's see what we have here. So we have this as a private property. Let's make this a public one, so this is easily accessible here as well. So you can now see that we are using the store here with the nodes and with the archive nodes. So let me save this and see if all of this works on the browser. So if I just refresh, you will see that we have everything working, and I can create a lot of nodes, and also I can archive the nodes. So everything is working fine. I'm going to get rid of this console. So I'm going to go back to the code and I'm going to remove the console log from here. And one important thing to note is that we are using the node service for everything now. We are archiving node using this node service. We are also creating node using the store or the node service. And we are initiating everything in the node service when this is initiated. So you can see that we have the observable and all of the actions here. On the other hand, everything that we have on the UI is now bound to the store. So we had to make the store public, which is here, and then we just use that on the HTML. So we have store.nodes as well as store.archived nodes count. Now I'm gonna just save this. And that's it for this video.